Hi everyone, trust you all are doing well. So we finished up our round. We did our database migration for our pivot table for our followers. Now the thing that we need to do now is to actually work with the view. Right, in order to work with the view, we go to resources view, profile pages, profile.show. Right, so this is the view that we finished up in 2 episodes back. And you downloaded this view right here. Okay. Now, the thing that we want to do now is we want to actually, you will see in your aside right there, your side navigation, you'll see we have follow buttons, a div for that. Right. So now this is the part that we're going to be working on in this lesson, and able to make the view, actually to make that a person to be able to click the button to make it follow or not follow. All right, so now the first thing is we don't want this button to show if the person is not authenticated. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do. So we move that inside a div. Okay, so we encapsulate basically that div with authentication. So if the person is not authenticated, that button mustn't show at all. Okay, so let's quickly see if, let me just put a button in here for now. Just a simple button. So if to see if we can see it. All right. Now I'm logged in as Maya at the moment. So let me just go to this guy's profile. So if I click on there, as you can see, we're viewing this simple button right there. So if we go to Maya's profile, we click on there, you can see we see that simple button as well. But Maya cannot follow herself. That doesn't make any sense. All right. So now the next thing that we want to do is we want to implement a functionality. If the user is actually on their own profile, that button mustn't be there either. So let's do that as well. All right. So if we go back to Visual Studio Code, in here, we're going to have another add blade syntax, and this one is going to be called unless. All right. Now in this one, we're just going to check if the authenticated user, let's just do it like this. If the authenticated user, all right, if that the authenticated user is the user, all right, the user that we're passing through. Okay, so if that user is that user, then just one sec. All right, so unless that user is that user, then show the follow button. Meaning, if this user is not the authenticated user, or let's say we go onto that profile, then please don't show this button. All right, so to anybody else, show the follow button. That's basically what it means in simple English. Okay. Anybody else except this user, please don't show this button. All right, show this button to them. All right, now let's see if we can see this button if we're actually in Maya's profile. So if I refresh, you can see we cannot see the button anymore on Maya's profile. So let's see if we go to anybody else's profile. As you can see, we can view the button now. But if we go to Maya's profile, we cannot see that button. All right. So in your case, if you logged in as John Doe, so just go to John Doe's profile and you will see that under John Doe's profile, it's not supposed to show. Okay. All right. So let's continue. The next thing. The next thing for us is to be able to say if the person is actually following, let's say in this case, Maya is following John Doe, then there must be unfollow. The button needs to change from a follow to an unfollow. And if Maya is not following it, it needs to show a follow button. All right. So we need to create a conditional in here. So let's create that. All right. Let me just go here. Follow buttons, and underneath this, let's just add that if statement right here. All right, so if the authenticated user, which is Maya currently because we're logged in as Maya, if the authenticated user, and if you're logged in as John Doe, it will be obviously John Doe. If the authenticated user is following, you guys remember when we created our as trade, let me just open it as, because someone might be new and they don't know where that is coming from. All right, in our has follows, we created a method is following. with the isUser, basically what it does is it checks the relationship. All right, we got our follows relationship right there. Then it will check if the following user ID is equal to the user that we're going to pass through ID. Then we return yes or no. All right. So if that user is following, now remember this is following, is looking for the user. So we just need to pass in that user variable right there. All right. So then we're going to have this. So if that following user, we're going to create, let's just create an else statement here. And then an end if like this. All right. So let me just give us some room. So the unless is encapsulating everything on the inside, and the auth is just making sure the person is authenticated first. Then we check if to anybody else except the authenticated user that's equal that to that user, we're displaying this button right there. But then we do another if statement in there to check if that person is following. If it's not following, we're doing, in this case, we're just going to put, you know what, let's finish up this form first. All right. So now the first thing that we're going to do, you have the div in there. We're going to create an X form. Now, the X form basically comes from the Blade UI kit. Let me just show you where that is for someone that might be new. All right, you go to bladeuikit.com. You're under the documentation. You will see we have forms right there. And this is basically the form that we're using. All right, and then obviously follow the installation. But if you're already here in the tutorials to number 76 now, I think you have been following quite along, so you know that we make use of this. But if you don't want to make use of the Blade UI kits, I will show you in a second how to do that as well. Let me just close this off. All right, so we're going to have an action in here. All right, now the X form action. All right, just remember when we created that profile route. So let me just open that route again. So under our web route, you will remember we created a follows route right here. Let me just give us some room here. All right, just remember, just change that follows was a get route. In the previous one, I forgot to change it to a post route. Okay. Just make sure you change it to a post route, and with this route right here. Just remember, it's expecting a parameter of a user right here. Okay, so that's what we're going to pass in here. So in action, we can have a route, and that's going to go to a follow. Okay, so that follow right here, this one right here. Okay, that follow right, and it's expecting the parameter of the user right there. Okay, now the next thing, if you don't want to do it with a blade, let me just show you the other way. So it's going to be a form, and then the route is basically going to be the same route, and you're just going to put in a method here equal to a post. Okay, and then inside here you're going to add CSRF, and you put in add method, and you're going to put here delete like this. Okay, so for the ones that don't want to use the Blade components, UIKit components, you rather do it like this. Okay, we're going to get to the same thing, right? So with this form, everything is already been put in. Okay. Actually, in this case, we don't need to add the delete. Just just leave it as the add CRF, just like that. Okay. Enough of that. So let's move on. So the next part that we're going to need is we need to create a button inside this component. Okay, inside here. Now I'm going to use the buttons that comes with Jetstream. Okay, so there's the XJet button. This button right here. For the people that might wonder where that comes from. All right, so let's go. We publish our vendor folder for our, let me just show you, views. The vendor folder for Jetstream, you will see components, and you will see a button right here. So I'm just referencing this button, and that button will have a type of submit. Okay. Right, so I'm doing XJet button. Okay, and inside that, I'm just going to let this be a follow. Okay, and let's copy everything inside here and just paste it down. And this is basically just going to be unfollow. you could have done a ternary operator, okay? So where you could have said, in this case, let's do it like this. Move that div up. Can delete the div here. Delete this one right here. Okay. Now, and just remove that underneath like that. So, right, so instead of 2 divs, you can have 1 div. All right, you can obviously refactor this however you want. You could have done a ternary operator where you said if the user is following then you do the rest. Okay, but for me, this works a little bit better. Just preference. End of the day, it comes down to preference. Okay, so if the user is following, do this. If it's not following, do this. Since we're going to the same route, you could have just done a ternary operator. Okay. So in this case, let's hope everything works. All right, so let me just open my follow controller. In here, I'm just going to die and dump. Now, let me just return the user. You can die and dump the user and return. I will just show you both anyways. Let's do it like this. As you can see, I'm in Maya's profile. There's no button being shown that she can follow herself or anything. Let's go to John Doe's thread, John Doe's profile. As you can see, she's currently following John Doe. So if I press the unfollow, okay, you will see the user class doesn't exist. Okay, let's go and check what's happening there. Right, so obviously in your controller, just make sure that you import the class at the top right there. Okay. So that's why we're getting an error right there. So let's go back. Now, as you can see, it returns the user right there. As you can see, the profile is for John Doe. So it's just kind of displaying the user right there. So all good. So if I die and dump that user, you will see it gives us the same information, but with just some extra information as well. Right, so here's the die and dump method. It gives us a whole lot of other information because, as you can see, we still get the John Doe and all the information right here that we need. All right. The other case, the returning of the user, just gives me just the user, just like this. All right, in JSON format. All right, but anyway, let's go back. All right, so if I delete this right now, I need to be able to actually follow and unfollow. All right, so click unfollow. As you can see, Maya did unfollow John Doe. So if I click follow now, you can see she's following. Now, the thing is, you can create a little notification right here, okay, to say if the person follows or not following. Okay, so if you just want to make it a better user experience, you can do that. So let's go to the controller again. Now, what you can do is you can just change this to be a with statement, but just remember, you're toggling here. Okay, so if, let's say in this case, I will not add actually a use statement in there. So you can add a session. All right. So if the person is being unfollowed, you change that to be unfollow, etc., etc. But in my case, I'm not going to need that. So yeah, because kind of the button kind of indicate like, listen, something happened. Okay. So in this case, Maya followed. Let's just see what happens in the database. Well, I think I've got these two mixed up. The first one needs to be unfollow because if the person is following, it needs to unfollow. If they're not following, they need to follow. Okay, so let me just change this. Okay, this is follow, and this must be unfollow. Like that. Okay, so if the person is actually following the user, it needs to unfollow. If it's not following, it needs to follow. Okay, otherwise things will be a confusion for you in the front end. Okay, so let me just fix this as well. Okay, let's go back and test it, make sure it works. Right, let me refresh. Now, as you can see, she's following John Doe. So if I refresh here, you can see in the database it's being followed right there. So you've got the user ID, Maya, and you've got the following John Doe, and you can see when it was created. And this part right here comes with the with timestamps. Okay, so if we unfollow, okay, as you can see, it's unfollowed. So if we refresh the database, as you can see, it updates accordingly. So if we follow again, if we refresh right here, you can see it updates accordingly. Right, so let me just see if Maya can follow someone else, just the first user. click the follow right there, and obviously it updates the database again. All right. So that's it. So now we got our view to work. Everything looks good. In my opinion, you can obviously design it and style it however you want. I'm just trying to bring in the functionality. Okay. Right, so what I want to do now is, in the next part, is I want the users that's following a certain user, if they create, let's say in this case, Maya is actually following John Doe. All right. Now, if John Doe creates a thread, Maya needs to be notified of the thread via email or via database notification. In this case, I think I'm just going to go for the email, not for the database one, just to send an email to all the people that actually being notified, listen, a thread is being created. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in the next one. So when Maya creates John Doe creates a thread, actually, Maya needs to get an email to let her know, like, listen, John Doe created the thread. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. And if you like the video, please give it a like. If you don't, please give it a dislike. And please consider subscribing to the channel. It will help us out a lot. Thank you so much. And see you in the next one. Goodbye.